Okay, in this particular video, we're going to talk about carbon and biomolecules. So the first question is why carbon, right? So carbon is an element number 6 on the periodic table. So what it means is that it will have six protons and 6 electrons. But when we arrange the electrons in the atomic structure, you will notice that at the outermost shells is going to have 4 electrons. So what it means is that carbon is really good at forming bonds with the other elements. In total, 4 of them. Okay. So it means it's really good at forming bonds with hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and other carbon atoms. So as a result, it's very good at forming a lot of large and complex molecules. So you can see that in this picture right here, we have methane, and this carbon is forming 4 covalent bonds with 4 hydrogen atoms. So organic compounds. So what are organic compounds? Organic compounds basically means carbon compounds. And this is because carbon is really good at forming long chains of interconnecting carbons. So you can see that right here, this rotating models here. The black balls represents the carbon atoms. And because of this ability for carbon to form bonds with other carbon, essentially carbons is the backbone of all organic molecules. And all organic molecules are carbon-containing molecules. So types of organic compounds include carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And many of them have what we call functional group. So functional groups are basically these groups that involve in the chemical reactions. If you see right here to the right, we have an organic molecule called ketone. So ketone has 2 functional groups right here, which are being circled. And we're going to go over what these functional groups are. They each have their own unique name. You're expected to know what their names are. And it's going to be very helpful if you know their names and be able to recognize those functional groups. So when a chemical reaction occurs between 2 molecules, these are the parts that are going to break or form connections with other molecules. So let's start with our first functional group. Functional group's name. The first one is made out of an O and H. So this is hydroxyl. The second one is made out of a double bond O connected to a carbon. So this is carbonyl. Then if you have an oxygen, right, the oxygen bonded, having a double bond with a carbon, and that carbon is also connected to a hydroxyl, that's a carboxyl method. Carboxyl. If you have a nitrogen connected to connected to 2 hydrogens, this is what we call an amino group. So we have hydroxyl group, carbonyl group, carboxyl group, and amino group. Next, we have sulfidyl group. There's no L here. So a sulfidyl group contains a sulfur and a hydrogen. Next, we have a phosphorus. Yes, you can see that there's a center P here that's connected to 4 oxygen. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's a phosphate group. A phosphate group. And if you have a carbon connected to 3 hydrogen, there's a methyl group. methyl group. So let's continue with the 4 types of organic compounds. You are expected to remember the elements that it contains within these four organic molecules. So let's start with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates contains the most basic elements. We have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Right? That's kind of like how it goes. Its name, carbon and hydrates. Hydrates made of hydrogen and oxygen. Examples of carbohydrates include glucose, starch, and glycogen. The main function of carbohydrates is to provide energy to cells, store energy, or forms body structures. We'll get into more details about these functions of each of these organic molecules. So as of right now, it's really just a general function of these biomolecules. Next, we have lipids. Lipids is also made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but certain lipids include phosphorus. So I will write a P here just in case there's that particular type of lipid. Okay. So examples of lipid include cholesterol, triglycerides, and phospholipid. And phospholipid is that lipid that contains phosphorus, P. The major functions of lipids include storing energy, forming cell membranes, or carrying messages, such as hormones. Next, we have proteins. Proteins are made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and occasionally sulfur. So we're going to write CHON and S. Examples of proteins include enzymes and antibodies, and the functions of proteins to help cells keep their shape, structures made of the muscles, catalyze chemical reactions, just as the case of enzymes, and also carries messages and material. Nucleic acids contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Examples of nucleic acids includes deoxyribonucleic acid, and all kinds of triphosphates. The major functions of nucleic acid includes containing instructions for proteins, passes instructions from parents to offspring, or help making proteins. So, as I said, we're going to go into details of the functions of these biomolecules in the later parts of the chapter. But as of right now, we're just going to focus on the elements that each of these biomolecules need in order to make these biomolecules. Essentially, what it means is that, let's say, if a particular environment doesn't have phosphorus, for example, then that cell will not be able to make lipid or nucleic acid because part of lipids contains phosphorus, and phosphorus is an essential element for nucleic acids. Therefore, it's very important to know the similarities and differences among all these biomolecules in terms of the elements. Next, a huge part of biomolecules involve the idea of monomer and polymer. So what is a monomer? So monomer is a small repeating unit that being used over and over again. Sorry, I shouldn't say that being used over and over again. It's like you have these units that are very similar to one another, and then they can connect with one another to form a bigger structure called polymer. So you can see that on your right side, we have a monomer that's being represented by a circle. And then if you connect all these circles together, they are monomers, you're gonna form a bigger structure, which we call a polymer. Okay? So this monomer can be very similar in terms of their structure and composition, but they can also be the same type of monomer. Next, let's say if you have two monomers connected with one another, that will be called a dimer. Dimer means two, right? Mono means one. So a dimer is made out of two monomers. If you have multiple monomers connected together, you're going to form a polymer. So polymers, by definition, is a large molecule made out of repeating monomers. Many organic molecules are polymers made out of monomers connected by a specific type of covalent bonds. So here's the table that shows the different types of different types of biomolecules and their respective monomers. For carbohydrates, its monomer is called monosaccharide. Mono means one, and saccharide is basically sugar. Lipids is technically not a polymer, so I wouldn't say lipid is a polymer, so not really a polymer. Because because the amount of monomers that you use is not really repeated per se. So a better way to categorize the type of units that we use for lipids should be building block. So you can think of it as the specific structure that we can put together to make lipid. A particular type of that building block is called fatty acid. Protein is a polymer, so the monomer is amino acids, and nucleic acids, the monomer of nucleic acids is nucleotides. So you can see in this picture right here. So we have monosaccharide or sugar. If you put a bunch of sugars together, they're going to form polysaccharide. If you have a lot of amino acid, if you put them and connect them together, they're going to form protein, which is a polymer. If you have nucleotides, if you connect them together, they're going to form nucleic acid. So the process in which how we form or break polymer is called dehydration, synthesis, and hydrolysis. So if you connect two monomers together in order to form a dimer or a polymer and connect them by covalent bond, and during this process, going to remove a molecule of water, we call this process dehydration synthesis. During these particular reactions, you can see that we have the functional group, hydroxyl group. So you're going to have two hydroxyl group. So the monomers containing those hydroxyl group, they're going to come together, and those hydroxyl groups are going to collide with one another. And as a result, we can take away the water molecule. And as a result, they can connect together by this covalent bond. Revert in the opposite direction. If you want to break that molecule, that process is called hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means using water to break the molecule. So in this picture, we have a model of a dimer, right? So basically two monomers connected together by a covalent bond. If you add water molecule in it, it's going to separate the two monomers. As a result, you are able to release the monomer away from that polymer. So remember the two processes, dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis. So in summary, carbon is a very exceptional element. Its ability to form bonds allowed it to form the backbone of all the organic molecules. And organic molecules are essential for life processes in all of the living organisms.